Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. But let's talk about today. We have another amazing guest. He's coming from the other side of the pond. He is a University of Reading graduate and currently works as the training and coaching the Rainmaking Lawyers of the 21st century at Legal Balance. He's also had past positions as a National Senior Business Development Manager at DWF and as an Interim Alliance Development Director at AICA. Excited to have him on the podcast today. Mr. Scott Simmons, welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Nate, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be chatting with you.
Oh my, an honor. It's an honor to have you here, Scott. I gotta be honest. But Scott, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Hello to anyone and everyone who's listening. My name is Scott Simmons, and when I describe myself, I tell people that I'm a toolbox for turning lawyers into rainmakers. And so how I do that is that I give lawyers the tips, tools, and techniques to get out into the marketplace, give great advice, and win more work. I coach clients on subjects around mindset, leadership, culture, habits. I train lawyers in how to sell and cross-sell, to network with confidence and purpose, and to give presentations that are, that people enjoy listening to, and they make other lawyers jealous. And I consult for law firms on how to put together strategies that they can take out into the market and use as the foundation for the future of their business.
So this is a new step in the podcast, a new element, a new unique perspective. As well, Scott is in England right now, and he lives in England, and that's where he works, as you could probably tell from the accent, which I love very much. As I told him before, I was very sure to make sure he knows that I love his accent. So first, I just want to get into the fact that I have no idea how the legal world works in England. And from first just looking at, because I always prepare for the guests, I put some facts down, I put their experiences down. Now you have JFS from 91 to 98, and then you ended up at the University of Reading. So how, like, you gotta explain to me, how do you become a lawyer in England?
Right, excellent question. I mean, you have to bear in mind that I qualified as a lawyer in 2006, but going back to then, I was in school at JFS in London, and that was in the early 90s. And in the early 90s, I wanted to be a lawyer, because I watched programs like LA Law. And I'm hoping that you will at least know of LA Law, even if you haven't seen it. But back then, I loved that show, and we used to watch it as like a family. And I just thought, oh, that looks amazing. That's kind of the life I want, and and it just all looked absolutely brilliant. Um, and so as I went through school, I decided, actually, having spoken to a few people, that I really loved politics. And so instead of studying instead of studying law at university, I was going to study politics. So that's what I did. Loved it. Great time. Studied, learned the theory of politics and the how what we see on TV is theatre compared to what it should be. And but I wanted to be a lawyer. So from there, I went to law school and did what's called the conversion course, where you kind of compress 3 years into really two. No, one actually, sorry, one. So that you get the theory side in the first year, and then you do the practical side after in that second year. And then you go on and you can get yourself a training contract. It's slightly different nowadays because in the UK they're transferring over to the solicitor's qualification exam, and then you've got the bar qualifications as well. So those are separate, and they're a slightly different way of qualifying into the law. But the thing was back then was that when I went to law school, the focus was really put on getting you into big law firms, big law. And that wasn't really interesting to me. I'd spoken to enough people. I'd done work experience at smaller niche law firms, and I really loved how they kind of really threw you into things. And so I wanted to work at smaller law firms. And so really I was almost kind of, in a way, kind of left out in the cold, because I wasn't seen as somebody who was going to go into big law. At law school, it felt like I was kind of just set to one side, which was absolutely fine. So I went in as a paralegal. I didn't have a training contract on that side, but I started off at a small high street law firm, and it was brilliant. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And I tell you something, Nate, it was probably the happiest I ever was as a lawyer. I loved it. Again, I say it, thrown in at the deep end, got to work immediately with clients. I was looking at, working on matters on my own. And then, I suppose what we'll talk about more on the sort of business side, my strengths were in business development. My strengths were in getting to know people. And really, that was how my career developed. But you kind of, you asked me how you qualify into it, and I sort of, in a long way around, as you'll gather from this conversation, is kind of how you can go about doing it in the UK.
No, I love that answer. I'm well informed now because I didn't know those things before. And I could have looked it up, but I'd rather hear from you to get that perspective and to ensure that I'm very much fully informed. So I know how to become a lawyer in England if I ever decide to do that, come across the pond, see what's going on.
You should
But
give it
which
some thought.
I definitely will be in England soon. I got to go see my Chelsea Blues play, even though they suck. See, I always say it too. I
Yeah,
told
let's not start there so soon.
yeah.
So early in this relationship.
So from there I have to ask, how did you figure out that the business development side of the law was for you? And a lot of the times on this podcast, I'll speak to people about why they chose the specific part of the law, that why they became a litigator, why they do transactional. And a lot of the times they'll reflect on past experiences that I had. I know in another episode that's not out yet with Ron Latz, I spoke to him about why he began doing his digital marketing. And he said as a kid, he used to have like a ton of lemonade stands. He used to run at the Little League games, he'd run like the concession stand. So he was always around business. So how did you come to the point where you said to yourself, okay, business development is for me?
Great question. So when I first started out in law, didn't really connect the two. But I was incredibly fortunate to be working with the head of department. I started out in residential real estate. Okay, so over in the UK we call it conveyancing. But I started out in real estate, and I had a head of department who was just brilliant when it came to talking about the customer experience, the importance of getting to know clients, And that really was our role. Our role was to help guide clients through their journey with us. But we were, and I've written about this and I've talked about this a lot. We were in this race to the bottom, you know, more and more pressure on our fees, fear about what was going on in the local market, and it was creating this whole sort of cauldron of low morale, complaints, sickness, all of this sort of thing. And having worked there for about 6 months with my boss, who was incredible but was off every so often with illness, I realized that we could do it a different way. If we, instead of trying to compete on price, if we focused on value, if we focused on experience, if we focused on levels of service, we could increase our pricing, take on less work, almost like the Jerry Maguire thing at the beginning of the film, you know, fewer clients, all that sort of stuff. But if we could go down that route, it'd have a really, really different outcome on so much that we were doing. And my boss put me in front of the partnership. I took to him a very sort of detailed proposal about what I was thinking. He put me in front of the partnership, you know, let me lead it, and away we went. And so quickly, Nate, what we found was not just buy-in from stakeholders, not just this idea that actually everyone really wanted great service, and what they were going to buy into was great service, and they were happy, you know, clients were happy to pay the prices that we charged. You know, estate agents, banks, accountants were ecstatic to be recommending clients to us because we were going to give great service. And all of those things just created a completely different type of working experience, an experience for clients. And it meant that the team were so much happier, and my boss wasn't off ill so much. So everything transformed from there. And with that, we were able to spend more time with clients. If you're working with fewer clients, you've got more time to spend with the ones that are your client. And I think I've built a career, Nate, on being nosy. I just like asking questions, as you do, and I love getting to know people. I love hearing their story. I do it from a place of curiosity, of genuine curiosity. And when you ask these questions, people talk. They tell you stuff. And I was finding that the more questions I was asking and the more I would listen, the more people would tell me. And then if I was really listening properly and they're telling me stuff, I could build connections with service providers who could help them achieve the goals that they were looking to achieve and overcome the issues that they had. And that became the basis for my career. I always knew, no matter where I went to, and I went from small ICO to a large regional firm. I then moved the first time I moved to Gibraltar, because actually you mentioned that I'm in the UK. I'm not. I actually live in Gibraltar. And for those that aren't quite sure, it's its own country. It's a little peninsula at the very bottom of Spain. So I'm in Central Europe, and I'm there. And among many reasons, I'm there because the weather is incredible by comparison to the UK. So the first time I went to Gibraltar, I was there for a few years. I worked for a fiduciary company, trust and company management company, and then for Gibraltar's largest law firm. And at that point, I suffered quite bad burnout. And I can put, I mean, it's down to a number of things, but I can put it down in a huge way down to the billable hour. And again, if you've seen my stuff or we get chatting this afternoon, you will leave here under no illusion that I hate the billable hour, and I do an awful lot to let lawyers know that their career does not have to be driven by working at firms that work under the billable hour. You've got so many options today that I wasn't aware of. But at the time, back then, I didn't know that there were these kind of real alternatives to that. So when I got, when I had that sort of period of that burnout, I knew, we were going to have to make some changes because I couldn't keep going back into that. Um, I got, I had a very good reputation. I had a very good reputation for coming up with ideas and building opportunities. And so I got a number of proposals to just focus in on business development. And I thought, brilliant. Ultimately, I don't consider myself to be a particularly brilliant technical lawyer. My strength was in helping clients achieve better outcomes. And so that was what was going to be my focus. And that was how I left the law to go full time into BD.
I think that's such an important sentiment just for the pure fact that you figured out what your strengths were and you played to them to as much as you possibly can. I think that's such an important thing for people to hear because in many cases, as I like to highlight on this podcast, that there is no straight path to the law or law school. Everyone pretty much has their own unique path, but we also all have our own unique skill sets, our own unique perspectives, our own unique life experiences that we had that all contribute to what we can maybe do down the line in terms of our work. And you clearly yourself have found what you love to do as well as what you're very good at doing. And from that, I have to ask, in terms of, because clearly the person that you worked at the law firm with, he became somewhat of a mentor for you and
Absolutely.
helped you immensely. And as you said before, a key part of rainmaking for these lawyers, if I were to use your term, rainmaking for these lawyers is knowing people, networking with people, having those connections to give introductions to other people, find leads for other people. Can you talk about how important networking and mentorship has been for you for your career?
Wow. Gosh, yes. It's been, it's been incredibly helpful. I mean, it really has. So, you know, I've had a few people that have really impacted my life and my career. And obviously, my first boss, yeah, it, I owe so much to him for who I am today. Having somebody that you can turn to and speak to and speak honestly about everything is massively important. I think the legal profession has a really big problem around the fear of making mistakes. And I think we have to overcome that by being open and honest. I mean, I made some absolute beauties as a practicing lawyer. I made some absolutely huge ones, and early in my career, made a really big one. And that boss then he said to me, Scott, he said to me, said, don't worry about it, because I was nervous. But the first thing I did, having that relationship with him, I went straight to him to tell him I'd made the mistake. And he said, Scott, mistakes are part of careers. We all make them. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. And the fact that, you've been open and honest about it means that we're going to be able to deal with it earlier than if you'd covered it up. And we sat for a while and he told me some of the mistakes that he'd made. And that strengthened our relationship even more because I knew I had such a great mentor, and that has stuck with my career. And I've always said to anybody who works with us or who I work with when I've been coaching or training, mistakes are never that huge, no matter what they are. The mistakes that you make can always be rectified. The bigger problems come when you try and hide them. So never ever do that. Own up to them. They can all be dealt with. They can all be handled. And then more recently, as I've gone into this journey around moving lawyers and law firms away from the billable hour, I've come across people in that space who have again had such a huge impact on my career, people who I turn to and talk to about the things I'm thinking about and want to, how I want to go about teaching lawyers these things. It is incredibly important. Find that kind. If you can find somebody, if you can find people who you can open up to, it'll be huge for your career. And when it comes to networking, it's funny because very often networking, although human beings are relational by nature, networking itself in the business context is really uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for most people, and it's because we're sort of thrown in at it with no idea what to do. And so there are things that you can do to make it easier, and that part of that is, I teach that to lawyers about how to network confidently. But it's huge. It's really important. Getting to know people, building that network for referrals and back, who those relationships that you can create that will add value to you and to your clients, and that you can add value to them. They form the basis of your career. And while it's something that you learn, networking is something that you learn. It is important, and it should play a big role in your career.
Something real essential you just said there is that networking can be learned, that it is indeed a skill, and
Yeah.
it's not just something out there in the world that just happens every so often. It's just something that can be built up.
Oh my God. Right. So I saw someone write this a while ago. They said, BD isn't for everybody. And I nearly threw my phone at the wall when I said, because I just thought, what a way to limit people by telling them that something is not for them, because all of a sudden there's things everywhere that aren't for you. And I sit there and I think, no, the only thing that stops anything from being for us is what we tell ourselves. Anyone can get really good at business development. There's no such thing as natural. I don't believe that we're naturally gifted at anything. I think these things feel natural because we've been doing them for so long. My youngest daughter is the most incredible negotiator. She's 12 now, and she's the most incredible negotiator. Do you know why? Because she sees her father doing it all the time, and she has learned that I do it not just to other people, but to her. And she has picked up these things over time. And now you can see her working out how she's going to negotiate with me or her mum or anyone else. It's a skill. These things are all skills. You mentioned football. There's nothing worse for a professional footballer than when an interviewer says, "Oh, is it just natural? Is it natural?" No, they've put thousands of hours, years of hard work and training into it, and to have it reduced to natural ability, it demeans all of that hard work that went in to get into where they were today. And so I think we have to stop with this natural ability thing and say you can learn anything if you're prepared to sort of turn your mind to it and put the work in.
Yeah, it's that mindset change. Something I talk about on this podcast, probably way too much, but it's such an important topic that I'm always inclined to speak about it. But it's sort of that growth mindset, not having that scarcity mindset. And you're pointing at you're loving what I'm saying here. So can you speak about a little bit the importance of having a growth mindset and the importance of not having a scarcity mindset, being open to opportunities and open to new experiences?
Right. Okay. So I love that I love that that's the way that you're thinking, and it plays such an important role for you, because when when we teach our flagship training course is called the BD Breakthrough Blueprint. Okay, up until the beginning of this year, it was a 2-day training course, and it covered It covered a selling methodology, a 9-step selling methodology, and then it was how to use CRM effectively, networking, presentation skills. And what I found throughout my career, you can teach lawyers how to sell, do BD all day long. If you do not deal with the fact that lawyers have a mindset problem with it, have a limiting mindset problem with it, don't believe that they can do it, it doesn't matter how many tips and tricks and you can do neuro-linguistic programming all day long, they're never going to use it. So for us, the absolute foundation stone of our course, which we made digital this year and got so proud of it, but the foundation stone is mindset. And what we do is we take the principles from Carol Dweck's book Mindset, and we condense it really down into about 45 minutes of just talking about what it means, how our thoughts, how our beliefs and thoughts determine our actions and then determine our results, and the results then determine our beliefs, which determine our thoughts, which determine our actions, and it's that circular thing. And if you can tell yourself over and over again that I can do this, I can do anything, it'll then determine how you go about doing the work on any subject, on anything at all. And so a growth mindset essentially, Nate, is just this idea that we can achieve anything through hard work, through putting the effort in. And it's about wanting to learn, it's about wanting to grow, and telling yourself that failure isn't final. Now, the problem with lawyers is that we have this sort of negative fixed mindset, which says perfection or bust. I've got to be great at it, and I've got to be great at it now. And if I'm not going near it. And the reality is, what lawyers forget is how many years we spent learning to become a lawyer. No lawyer just woke up one morning and was brilliant at it from the day before, not knowing anything, and day two they're brilliant lawyers. No, it's years of learning, years of practice, and you're on this constant lifelong journey because the law is always changing, right? And yet we then, from being lifelong learners, we then say that things are within our capacity and without and not within it. So we limit ourselves despite the fact that right before us is this lifelong learning journey that we're on with the law. And when you start by remembering that what you're telling yourself determines everything else, you then realize that you have a choice. That awareness gives you choice. That you can sit there and say, fine, okay, well, I've decided that this is beyond me, so I'm not gonna try. But actually, if I'm prepared to put the time and the work in, I can get to a really good level with this. And that, for us, when we're teaching lawyers, we start with mindset, because nothing else matters if I can't get you to appreciate that you can do this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think especially now, having a growth mindset is so essential and really just necessary for anyone, just for the pure fact that maybe 30 years ago this wasn't true. But now it's especially true. We have the internet. There is so much information out there to anyone's disposal. Even for myself in starting this podcast, the first thing that I did is just went onto Google and I looked up how to start a podcast. It was as simple as that. And there was so
Yeah.
much information. There's so many things out there that can help you, especially even something as small as taking this audio file and converting it to an MP3. I had no idea how to do that.
Yep.
I was like, what is all this? What do all these words mean? And I just went on Google, I went on YouTube, I looked up videos, and I taught myself how to do these things. But
Yep.
it's just the fact that not that I know how to do these things, but the fact that the information is out there in order to actually get these things done. And that's in pretty much any sector in any industry. And I think as well, going back to more of the networking and mentorship, is that there's so many lawyers, especially now, as we were talking before the podcast, that it seems that the law is on the precipice of this new era. That there's so much going on. There's so many people on LinkedIn, especially
Yeah,
lawyers, just like yourself, who are very vocal, who are always speaking, giving tips, giving skill tips, giving people the sorts of things that will help them be successful in their career. Just the swaths of information, it's almost too much information. But I think the internet is the greatest thing to ever happen ever, just in terms of it's given people the ability to learn certain skills at such a ridiculous rate that you can spend 2 days researching something, and at the end of it, you have more information than you need to be
yeah,
successful with that certain skill. And
yeah,
I always look back. I'm one for analogies, but I'm a very big gym guy. I love going to the gym. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And I think of pretty much everything in terms of the gym because I think it's
yeah.
transferable to anything. So
Okay.
in terms of how do you improve in the gym, you just do more reps for more weight as time goes on, and that's pretty much it. That's the only metric you ever need to follow in order to, get gains, as they would say nowadays in the gym. And it's applicable to pretty much anything. You want to get good
It
at
is.
networking, you put the reps in. That's a very big thing that goes around the internet now, is that getting those reps in.
Yeah.
But switching gears a little bit, switching gears, not that much. It's still all connected. But in terms of your money making for the rainmaking lawyers of the 21st century, what are some key skills that you employ to the people that you help out to ensure for their success? What are some two or three essential skills that you think people should have to be successful as lawyers?
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Okay. So, and I say this, I talk about it more now in the context of the fact that AI, we're seeing so much more around that. And and I love it. I think AI is going to be absolutely brilliant for the legal profession. I think I think it's going to have an absolutely devastating impact on the billable hour, which is fantastic. Um, but it's going to change. It's going to change the legal profession quite profoundly because it's going to be able to do. It's going to be able to do a certain type of work, the research and the drafting, a speed and an outcome that human lawyers simply cannot do. But what it's going to allow is going to allow human lawyers the ability to spend more time with clients, to take the output that AI provides and hone it to clients' specific circumstances. Because all matters might be the same, but you know what's never the same? Two human beings. And until you sit with a client and understand their motivation and understand what's driving them, what keeps them up at night, what gets them up in the morning, till you really understand that, AI can only do so much. It can give you certain bits of information, but it cannot put an output based on human emotion and what those sort of drivers. So for me, the the tips that I give to every single lawyer is ultimately, do you know what business development is about? Business development is about communication. Okay, so it's about speaking and listening, and the speaking part is about asking questions. So that you want to ask good questions, you've got to be genuinely curious about the people that you're speaking to. Okay, and that takes a little bit of work because if you're going to be genuinely curious about people, you sort of either are genuinely curious about human beings as a whole, or you're curious about a sort of segment of people because you're interested in them, from a demographic point of view, or from an industry point of view, or for their values, or because there's a loads of different reasons why you might be interested in people. But that's why you kind of work out what you enjoy doing, who you enjoy working with, who you believe that you can help the most. And that's going to help you to ask lots of questions. And it's questions that show that you're interested. It's questions that show that you care. It's questions that show that you want to help. And after that, if you're going to be able to help them, you can only help them if you then sit back and listen to their answers, listen to what they're telling you. And so, I know we talk a lot about active listening. And active listening is a really, really important skill. And I had a great definition of it recently that said, active listening at its most basic is just asking a question, listening to the response, and then asking a relevant follow-up question. And the reason that that's important is because that follow-up question determines whether or not you've actually been listening to the answer that you've got. Right? Because if the follow-up question appears to be nothing to do with what you've almost heard before, instantly, you want to put clients and prospects at ease. And if you're going to do that, you're going to engage in a conversation with them. And you engage in a conversations between two people, they flow because each other, both or more parties are listening to each other. And the follow-up questions show that they've been listening. And again, hey, listening is a skill. It is a skill. One of the problems that I've always got is that I get so excited about the conversation that I'm in. I almost rush to somebody's speaking, that they're giving me a response. I'm so excited by the response that I want to jump in with something early to show my excitement, to show that we're kind of, and yet what I've learned is that you've got to give people time to give the response, because where they might have started may not be where they're going in that conversation. And when you interrupt them, they may come back and go, actually, that's not where I was going to go with this. I was going to go somewhere completely different. And it sort of stops that rapport building, which is really, really important. It's those skills are so important, those human skills. I think the other thing is really that understanding that what we bring to the table, we lawyers, Nate, transform people's lives. And there are many things in life, Nate, that you can get wrong and you can put it right. Okay, and there's not much lost when you do it. You get the law wrong and you are screwed. So, but get the law right and it can transform your life. Okay, it can transform the life of the client that you are working with. And steadily over the last, I would say 50 years or so, we have forgotten that what we do is transform people's lives. And we have to remember that, because the more we can remember that what we do transforms people's lives, the more confidence we can have in about talking about how we transform people's lives. And when we can talk in those terms, people will start to remember the huge value that we bring. And so it's we've got a million stories about how we've transformed people's lives, by the way. Lawyers have got a million stories and we downplay them all the time. But once we start talking in those terms and telling those stories, it has such a massive impact on us as lawyers that actually, when we start sharing them, the clients that we want to work with, they can visualize what it would be like for us to transform their lives too.
Yeah, I think that further exemplifies a point that I love talking about, is that many people will go through law school and a lot of it is reading over briefs and writing motions, and I've never been to law school myself, but I've talked to I don't think I've talked to enough people about it, but I've talked to a small tiny section of people, that have talked about their law school experiences, just like yourself. And that human aspect of the law gets lost when you're going throughout law school because you're
Yeah,
reading all these cases. It's
yeah,
all very much plain text,
yeah.
and you're taking the facts of the case and you're applying it to the applicable law that needs to be applied to. And a lot of the time, you forget about that huge human aspect of it all, that on a client to attorney basis, you're just two human beings talking to each other, trying to figure out a solution to a problem. And I
Yeah.
think additionally, with that, also the business part of the law gets thrown out just as much. And I've had many people on this podcast. I always think back to Elizabeth Larrick, who was on episode 14, and she talked about starting her own law firm. She had no idea what she was doing, and she would think back, seeing, thinking about going through law school, working at law firms. And fortunately enough, she had someone at a previous law firm she worked at that really helped her understand, like, this is a business. This isn't just applying facts to the law. This is, we're trying to make money here. We have to make a profit in order to move forward and actually exist as a law firm. And
Yeah.
she talked about the struggles of starting her own law firm. So what would be some tips for lawyers that you have in terms of what kind of principles should they instill in their own lives to ensure that they're being cognizant about the fact that this is a business?
Oh, okay. Right. So it's so brilliant that you're talking about that. So I'm gonna work, start with the business part and then go back to something you said earlier about dealing with people. Law is a business. And if there is one thing that has frustrated me over the last 20 years or more that I've been in the profession, is that university, law school, training contract, all of it, no one tells you that you are in a business and that we're in a business. It just so happens that and businesses have to sell what they make. It just so happens that what lawyers sell is law. We sell knowledge. Okay. And if you want to create a business or you want to create a practice, you're going to have to understand that you are selling something. And what you are in is a business. And so you've got to understand business principles. Right. And it's been a huge frustration for me that from that no one from law school beyond, university, law school beyond, ever really tells us that. What we're taught, as you highlighted, is just to do the work that's put in front of us. That's what we're taught. And then it's almost an expectation that either somewhere along the journey, someone will tell us that it's the laws of business, or that we are just supposed to learn this on our own. We're just supposed to have this moment of clarity that laws are business, and therefore, oh God, now things will change. Now you, the earlier, Nate, that you can understand that law is a business, the more it is going to help you in, or any law student, prospective lawyer. The earlier you can understand that you're in a business, the better it's going to be for your career. Now, interestingly, what I find over and over and over again is you sort of reach a point in the law where, for the vast majority of lawyers, they're kind of like, I've done the practice part of it for years. Actually, I'm more interested in the client side. I'm more interested in getting out there and winning the work, but I've no clue how to go about doing it because I no one ever sort of taught me how to do it until I reached partnership. And then all of a sudden, when I was being made up to partner, all of a sudden the conversation was, well, how, Nate, now we're going to make you up to partner. How are you going to go out there and win the work? We need, you're going to, and you sit there and you go, say, what now? Well, yeah, Nate, you've got to go and win work because you're a partner. We're going to give you a team. And well, I've never had to do that. I've been here, I've been practicing 10, 12, 15 years. I've never had to do that. I have got no idea. And then you are in this awful place where, for the next number of years, you're sitting in partnership meetings going, why aren't you consistently bringing in work? Well, I'm having to learn this now. I'm having to relearn everything because no one taught me, no one explained to me, and I was just being given more and more work to do. Just get on with the, if you do more work, if you do more of what's in front of your desk, you do more, you'll work the way up the ladder. And people forget that at a certain point, you're going to be part of a business that expects you to be winning work. And the earlier, Nate, that law students and lawyers can get to grips with the fact that that's what we're doing here. We're in a business. The more it's going to turn your mind to the fact that the work isn't just about doing the work that's put in front of you. The real business of law is going out there, speaking to people, finding out what they need, and then giving them what they need. That, very simply, is really how you turn law into a business. And I just before we go, I want to come back to the thing you said about dealing with humans. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of the film Patch Adams with Robin Williams.
I have not. I'm writing it down.
Right. Okay. It's a beautiful, beautiful film with Robin Williams, and um he he himself suffers from mental health problems, and he decides that he wants to go into medicine because he wants to help people. But when he goes to medical school, he finds that they're not actually, it's all theory, they're not meeting people, and he's desperate to help people. So he sort of finds ways to sneak into the hospital and help people, but he keeps getting in trouble every time he gets caught. And so he decides that he's going to open up a sort of clinic while he's learning, so that he can help, and deal with people. And that, for me, spoke wonderfully about what you were talking about, is that, again, in law school and things, we can get so caught up in drafting documents and reading case law and things like that we forget at the heart of what we do is people. That behind all of this is people who are going to be impacted by the work that we do. And remembering that these things, that we are there to help people, when you can start to understand that, Nate, it can really change the way that you work and the outcomes that you can provide for people. It's beautiful film. Can't recommend it highly enough.
Well, there you go. Now I got a new movie I gotta watch. Patch Adams with Robin Williams. I hope it's not as tear-jerking as Good Will Hunting. That's one of my favorite movies ever. That one made me cry a little bit. It was,
I won't say anything then.
it was, oh, it's such a great movie. But something you've been speaking about is giving people what they need, and it boils down to something of value. So this is an interesting question, I think. How would you define value? Because I've gotten some interesting answers from this, but how would you yourself, Scott Simmons, define value?
How would I define value? Brilliant question. Brilliant, brilliant question. Okay. How I look at it is this. You come back to need. You mentioned need. Okay. The thing about law, when we talked about that before, is we're selling knowledge. People come to us because they don't know what the law is. And because of that, they don't know what they don't know. And too often we give too many clients what they think they want, as opposed to what we know that they need. And the example I always give is, a client comes to you, they've got an internet business, and you take a look at their website and you discover they've got no privacy policy, no GDPR advice, data privacy advice, no website terms and conditions. They've got none of them because they didn't know that they would need them. And our job is to let those clients know that without these things, they stand to be in serious trouble. Their business stands to be in serious trouble. Clients very often don't realize that they need these things. They may have come for something else, but our job is to educate clients on what they need, a lot of the time, Nate, when they don't even know that they need it. And the thing about that is that there is where we add real value. That is the value that we bring to clients, not doing what they necessarily say they want, but advising them on the things that they actually really need. Whether a client decides to go ahead is up to them. But our job as advisors, the way that we add and create real value is by using our knowledge, using our experience to help them get better results, to help them get better outcomes. Now, from the other perspective of value, I then talk a lot about pricing. Okay. And maybe we will, maybe we won't have time to talk about the billable hour and things like that. But for me, we're always dealing in value. Every time you go into a shop or you go online, you look at something, you look at what it, you look at its features, you look at you think about the benefits, and then you look at the price and you go, well, does what I'm going to get represent value? And if in your mind, you've worked out that what you're going to get is greater than or equal to the price, then you've got value. And if it doesn't, then you're not getting value. But value is really personal, Nate. So it's what somebody sees as value, you may not see. And again, that's why these things are all so individual. And that for me is where sort of pricing comes into the conversation that lawyers have got to really start getting good at.
Just like each person has their unique perspective on value, each person has their unique journey to the law. Look at that. I'm connecting everything.
Brilliantly done.
Like when I'm in the drive-thru at McDonald's, I know I'm getting good value from that. I love McDonald's. I really do. But I limit myself to twice a month. I went last week, so I got one more this month. Regardless, I'll let you do it. Speak about the billable hours because you clearly want to, and I want you to.
Okay. So here's the problem as I see it with the billable hour is that it doesn't relate to value in any way. Okay, what the billable hour does is it assumes that your value is in the time that you spend doing something, not the outcome that you provide to somebody. Okay, so what it then means is the more time you spend doing something, the more you get paid. So your outcome, if we both have the same charge out rate, let's say it's $400 an hour, but it takes you 4 hours to do something and it takes me 2 hours to do the same piece of work, and we both produce the same outcome, I get paid $800, you get paid $1,600, but my client has gotten the answer, has got an outcome faster. And so actually their outcome is better with me because they're able to move on using that quicker than if they work with you under the billable hour. What it also means is that clients are paying more for a lawyer not to have the knowledge than when the lawyer does have the knowledge. So for example, I'm $400 an hour, you're $400 an hour. I know the answer to this problem and you don't know the answer to this problem. So I can give that answer straight away. And essentially it might take me an hour or two to give that answer. It might create $1 million worth of benefit to the client. Okay. So I've done it in, say, an hour or two, again, $800. You have gone off and you have no idea what the answer is. So you go off and you do the research and you do 4 hours of research and then you write up the report and that takes you another 4 hours. Okay. So then you charge that client 8 hours at $400, which is $3,200. Right. Okay. So I've done it in 2, you've done it in 8. I'm charging that client for having the knowledge, but you're charging that first client $3,200. After that, Nate, you've got the answer. So the next time a client comes to you, you've got that report ready. You can do it in, say, 2 hours. The next client and the next client after that and the next client after that are paying you $800. But that first client pays 3,200 because you don't know the answer. So again, there's no correlation between hourly rate and value. What also happens under the billable hour is that, let's say you start off, you have to do 12, your target is 1,200, 1,200 hours over the course of the year. You hit that target. So the next year, your hourly rate might go up, but so does your hours that you have to achieve. And you are judged by the number of hours that you reach, not the quality of the work that you do. So you might have clients that say to you all year long, Nate, you have been brilliant. Love working with you. Fabulous. Right. But at the end of the year, you miss your hourly target. You're not getting a bonus. Nate, really sorry. You've done fantastic work, but you didn't hit your target. Yeah, but look at the number of happy clients I've got. No, sorry, Nate. If you'd have taken a bit longer on the work, you might have hit your hours, but you didn't. And so, we can't give you that bonus. Think of what that does to a lawyer who sits there and goes, actually, I've done great work this year, but I'm only being judged on the number of hours that I do. A really last week in an online magazine called Roll On Friday, they did an anonymous survey asking lawyers whether or not they have ever padded their timesheets. 35% so far, because it's an ongoing poll, 35% have said yes, they do it. I think something like 13% or something, I can't remember what it was, something like that, say they do it regularly. So there's an endemic problem in the legal industry with padding time anyway. But the more hours you have to do as your career goes on, where's the balance? Like, how do you create balance when what you are rewarded for is the amount of time you're sat at your desk, the amount of time that you record? The billable hour doesn't care if you have a family. It doesn't care if you want to go to the gym. It doesn't care if you want to go to a football match at the weekend. The billable hour demands that you sit at your desk. And that is how it defines productivity. Not the quality of your work is not productivity. You being sat at your desk recording time is apparently a metric for productivity. And that in itself is utterly ridiculous. But coming back to that balance, we have a serious mental health crisis in the legal profession. You can't overcome it by pushing lawyers to do more and more and more hours every single year and telling them that their value is in the number of hours they're sat at their desk. We will never overcome that by being driven by this business model that doesn't care about anything else other than the number of hours that you achieve for a business. Now, there are alternatives out there, and the sort of two that I'm really focused on are value-based pricing and subscription models. With value-based pricing, you value the work and you value the client, and you have to do a bit of background into it. And yes, it requires a completely different way of thinking, but actually for the same work that, if you and I both do the same work and you do it under the billable hour and you charge that client £3,200 and it's taken you 8 hours, I can charge that client £3,200 for doing it in 2 hours, and the client's happy because I would have charged him $3,200 anyway. Now I'm charged, but I'd have got it back to him in 8 hours. I'm charging $3,200, but I'm getting it to them in 2 hours, and the client is happy. The whole methodology, the whole thinking becomes focused on the client and their outcomes, as opposed to, look at how hard I'm working, which bears no relation to the outcome that it's going to get the client. There's so much to this. And the one thing, I would say about all of this is that there are options out there. I know that there are people that believe if you want to go into big law, you've got to put up with billable hours. No, you don't. You absolutely do not. It is not the only way to have a successful legal career. You know, your podcast alone has talked about the different routes into law, the different ways that you can go. Back when I was in you know in your place, they, I had I was led to believe that the only good legal career was in big law. Okay. And I and it was really, really difficult for me to make the choice to say I didn't want to go into big law. I felt like I wanted to be a big fish in a small pond. But it worked out beautifully. Well, I suppose it didn't work out beautifully because I suffered from burnout when I got to bigger and bigger law firms. But I got the career that I wanted. I did it my way. And what I would say to anybody who's listening to this is that there are so many different paths to this. You don't have to be driven by a business model that does not take into consideration your well-being, or the reasons that you came into the law.
Well, Scott, I got to be honest. I'm convinced. I'm absolutely convinced. I think you have a compelling argument here for why the billable hours don't work. And if I were to ever start my own law firm one day, I will not be doing the billable hours because, like you said, it does make it makes unbelievable sense. I think it's a brilliant argument that you're making here, and the case for it is very clear and apparent. And over time, especially now as I look on LinkedIn, as guests have talked about previously, that the billable hours is sort of now it's on thin ice now. A lot of people are moving to subscription models. A lot of people are moving to value-based models, and it's that change in the law. And that segues to my next question, that we're on the precipice of a new era. I look around all the time on LinkedIn. I look even on Twitter a lot of the times as well. Lawyers talking a lot, and sort of the advent, like you said before, of AI technology, all these new products. What sort of products or technology do you give to the people that you worked with regularly? I guess the question boils down to what sort of tech stack are you giving to people in terms of any products or anything that you use personally that you find fascinating, maybe in, the new technology or AI or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So we're always on the lookout for uh for legal tech, for any tech that is going to improve the way that you can work. And again, legal tech is great if you want to speed up what you're doing. If you want to speed up, get faster outputs, faster results for clients, legal tech, any form of technology is going to help you do that. Unfortunately, again, not to keep hammering the point home, the faster you do something under the billable hour, the less you're getting paid. And if you want to, if people who are listening to this and are in legal tech, if you want to understand why you struggled to make an impact in law firms, part of that reason, which they will be aware of anyway, is the fact that when the minute you tell people, well, you can get faster outcomes with this, you've lost law firms that are driven by the billable hour because they're thinking, hold on, faster outcomes mean we get paid less. But as a business that is driven by outcomes for clients, there's loads of different technology out there that you can use, and it's everything. It's everything from your CRM. I mean, when we're talking about business development, you can't do business development at scale without using a CRM system. Okay, your CRM system, which contains, details of your prospective clients, your clients, the deals that you are working on with them, the pipeline that you've got. If you want to get a really, really clear, accurate picture of what your pipeline's looking like, how many might be coming through the pipeline for you, how you might be able to budget for your CRM system becomes incredibly important. Then you've got things like your practice management software, which is how do you take clients on a journey that is really, really simple and enables them to just get, to get a clear picture of where they are, how to onboard them quick, simply and easily. Nowadays, you can check people's ID by getting them to download their passport and take a photo of themselves, and then the AI, the technology can check the two and make sure they're dealing with a human being and all of this, right? You can do that, and KYC. I don't know if that's what it's called, but KYC out in the UK, getting to know your client, that ID checks. So you can get it done now so quickly, whereas back in the day, my God, you had to get clients in, so you'd send them off the paperwork, mate. It was all written on paper and everyone's right. You can do all of this stuff online now, and it fascinates me that still the legal profession uses so much paperwork. I find it really absolutely fascinating. You've got data rooms now where if you're involved in litigation or you're involved in M&A, you can put all of that paperwork into these data rooms where it's all in one place. You can find it all. You don't have to have reams and reams and files and files, folders and folders of all of these things. Your emails now, things, your intranet, how you can share data with and information with clients. There's so much incredible stuff, and we haven't even touched on AI. What happened back in November 2022 when ChatGPT went live, just changed, really did sort of change the game in a huge way, because AI's been around for a while. There's been these products that have been driving AI for ages. ChatGPT made it accessible, made people think, oh, look, I can actually interact with this thing. I can talk to it how I would talk to somebody else. And I can get an output now. I can get a response. And what's then subsequently happened is you've got some incredible products that are using that technology. And so what we're seeing with the likes of LexisNexis's product and Co-Counsel by Case Text, Spellbook, others, you're seeing these things use large language models to produce outputs incredibly quickly. And this is going to enable lawyers to shift their focus away from being document drafters and researchers onto going back to being trusted advisors. I think it's so incredibly exciting. We're not just going to be sat there going, oh, there's a document, sign it. It's going to be, we've got time to sit down with you, really explain to you what this means and what this is going to do for your business and how it helps you achieve the goal that you came to us for. And actually, we've now got time to sit with you, work out what your wider needs and goals are. Let's start working on those as well. For me, law firms that engage with technology and embrace it and use it to benefit clients, that's the future of the legal profession.
Yeah, I believe that myself. I've known about ChatGPT for like a really long time. I think it was senior year of high school, so it was 4 years ago that I've been in tune with it. I've known who Sam Altman is for a very, very long time. He's great. But and even ChatGPT, like you said, when they first really released the product at first, I think it was GBT3. It was when I first used it, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is crazy. And I use it a lot for school. Sorry to any of the professors listening if they are. Um, but it's
Yeah, we
such
use it every day. We use it every day.
it's it's so incredibly useful, and it just goes back to the amount of information that is out there in the world that you can get easily, accessibly in your hands instantly,
Yeah.
literally instantly within seconds. So it's such a wonderful thing,
Yeah.
and it's a dawn of a new era here in the legal field. But switching gears a little bit to go to what sort of recommendations you have here. This is a little segment I do, the book recommendations. What are Scott Simmons' official book recommendations live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast? It doesn't have to be about the law. It's just your favorite books, the two or three, you could say five, it doesn't matter. There's no limit.
Okay, easy. Love it. Right. Okay. So obviously we talked about Carol Dweck's mindset. That that should be every single lawyer out there, or law student, should read that book. Should read that book and drink it in, because it will change your thinking about what is possible for you. Right? That's absolutely huge. The next one is atomic habits. Atomic habits. So when you're thinking about changing your mindset, it's about making sort of small changes, those 1%, the marginal gains. And Atomic Habits is the most incredible book, because it teaches you how to create habits that can last you a lifetime, and how you can switch from bad habits to creating really, really helpful, long-lasting habits. And if you're going to go down that route of learning new things, you want to create the habits of doing it. The third book, which I always keep in my office, is the Culture Code. There's no point showing it to you because no one can see it. It's right behind me. It's next. Well, it's kind of next to Batman. Sorry, the figurine that I keep in the office of Michael Keaton's Batman, because I'm a man child. So the Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. So I was having a conversation with someone about this yesterday, and we were talking about the problem of culture within the legal profession. And again, I'm going to give the billable hour a bashing. The poor culture that's created when so many firms have work under the billable hour, because of how siloed and selfish and things it makes lawyers. Culture is everything. There's a famous quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Absolutely true. You can create the most incredible strategy if you do not have a business in which people buy into it and feel like they are part of something and feel they have the space for growth. That strategy will go down the toilet completely. Culture is absolutely fundamental to the growth of a business. If you get culture right, everything else will almost be kind of seamless, because you'll have buy-in across the business, and you'll have people that feel confident about coming to you and sharing ideas. And your job as a leader is not to tell people what to do, it's to give people the tools to be able to give their best to you every single day. When you create great culture, everything else really does flow from there. So that's kind of three. And my favorite one when it comes to sales, to business development, is Eat Their Lunch by Anthony Iannarino. That, when it comes to business development, has been my Bible. It really has, because out of that, you understand that your job is about adding and creating value. You understand the principles behind why law firms lose clients. You understand the principles behind how you can steal other law firms' clients. Whenever I say the word steal to lawyers, they get so uncomfortable with it. And I'll have to explain to them, you have to see it as stealing, because if you don't see it as stealing, you won't work hard to retain your own clients. You have to treat your clients as if they are precious to you. And the idea that they might be stolen away from you by another lawyer, you have to treat them as if they could be. That book, from a BBD perspective, although it doesn't talk about law, it talks. You can adapt it so well to principles around selling legal services. So there's more, there's others, but those four are yeah, I love those four. I read them just over and over again.
Oh yeah, the those are some amazing recommendations. And going back to Atomic Habits, which I've never read that myself, but I am a philosophy major. Many times on this podcast, I talk about I go into my little philosophy rants a little bit because I can't help it. I really sometimes I really can't help it. But something like Atomic Habits, one of my favorite philosophers ever, Aristotle, even though he was around so long ago, thousands of years ago, he was writing about habit so long ago. But he just talks about how essential it is that the way you cultivate virtue is by building those habits, building the habits of virtues to become a virtuous person. So just something like that, I always keep in mind. One of my favorite books is the Nicomachean Ethics, which is like crazy. It's like why would you read that, Nate? It's sometimes I don't think it's that hard to get through. It is very old language, and he talks an argument the whole time, so you're just going through it like that. But I think it's an absolutely amazing. It's brilliant, and I love old books. I love old
Yeah,
books a lot, and I love it because it's when I read something and I'm able to apply it to my own life, just the fascination around the fact that this was written thousands of years ago, before there was any computers, before there were any iPhones, before
yeah,
there was even a car, that these people were talking about, habit thousands of years ago, and it's still extremely applicable today. Because
yeah,
it goes back to the whole human aspect is that as much as things have changed around us, human beings fundamentally, human nature hasn't changed as much as maybe people believe. And
yeah.
I'm just I'm all over the old book stuff. But third to last question here. What are the sorts of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, either through LinkedIn, YouTube, Reddit, Substack, Instagram, Twitter? I always forget something. All those types of things. What's crossing the transom of Scott's mind on a daily basis?
Right. Okay. So um I'm on LinkedIn every day. So I post somewhere between 3 and 6 times a week, but I'm on there every single day. And I love it because what you learn with social media is that you curate your feed. You decide what goes into your feed. I remember I came off of Twitter at the end of 2016 because it had become so toxic in the UK around Brexit and things. Twitter had become so toxic around that, and so I came off it and felt like the best thing I'd ever done. It was only sort of years later that I realized actually the reason my feed was so toxic on Twitter was because I had allowed it to just be filled with Brexit related things. Um, so so you do curate it, but you also have to remember that these things they're very addictive as well. And I've had to I've had to be very strict and regimented about how much I'm on even LinkedIn. But that when it comes to social media, although we have an Instagram page and we're on TikTok as well. I'm not personally I don't personally use Instagram or TikTok very often because oh my God, how easy it is, just to keep scrolling and sitting there all day long and you realize you woke up and the sun was just rising and before you know it the sun's setting and all you've done is scrolled through videos. That said, the videos about folding your clothes, I love those. Those are just, I cannot get enough of those. But everything else, I try and steer clear of. And again, my wife is the CEO of Legal Balance. She tells me off regularly because I'm not creating enough videos for either LinkedIn or TikTok at the moment. So I've got to get back on with. I've got to get back on. Um, I read. I read loads. I mean, look, for my job, I need to because I need to be able to sort of learn what's going on, what changes are going on, what principles we can take into the 21st century that are new and are that offer great value. So I read a lot. I watch I get sort of newsletters all around leadership and selling that I can adapt for my clients. But outside of that, I also like to switch my brain off. So, if you're asking me what I consume on a daily basis, I'm a film lover. I love watching films. I think there comes a point for everyone where you kind of need to just switch off. We live in Gibraltar, the weather here is beautiful 300 plus days of the year, so getting out and about, I'm happy to come. I'll come home at the end of the day, and I can sit and read a book out on the balcony while the sun's in my face, not to make you feel bad, Nate, but um you know I enjoy doing that. But if I'm going to switch my brain off, and I'm not going out for a walk or increasingly trying to do more exercise, um films for me. And I do these BD analogies using films. So what I do is I'll watch a film and I'll sit there and I'll go, oh, that's a really good analogy for business development principle. I'm going to make a video about it, put it out on social media. I love finding those. I haven't done those for ages, but I've got a list of them that need to get done. So I'm going to be doing a load of them next week. But when I'm consuming things, those are sort of my go-to.
Yeah, I'm a big deleter of apps, so like I'll delete everything. So if I'm on Instagram for like 5 minutes too long, I'm like, all right, I gotta delete it now. Because it's kind of sort of that like mental block. Because it's like
Was it?
if I want to get to something, oh, I gotta re-download it. I gotta go through all of that, and then
Yeah,
I'm less inclined to go do it. Sometimes I still do, but it, it's it, it's what's the funny part about the algorithm, I guess, is that the one of the funniest things I ever learned is that it's meant to make you scroll more. It's
absolutely.
literally engineered. Like that's how they make money. That's how they get the correct margins, is they get you to keep scrolling. They'll curate it till the cows come home to ensure that you're on the app longer than you usually are. And
Yeah,
when I found, like, even science, like they do science experiments in order to figure out and perfect the algorithm even more to ensure
yeah,
that you keep scrolling. So that's always, whenever I'm scrolling now, I always keep that in mind. And I'm like, they got me sometimes. I'm like, oh, it's all right.
yeah.
But even sometimes, like, you'll keep going, and like in my head, I'm like, stop scrolling, stop scrolling. It's like, no, no, don't get off, take your finger off the phone. And then
Absolutely.
I finally, I finally get off of it. But second to last question here, and I forgot to say this before, but this ties into the question. You were saying that you were watching football at the weekend. I say that all the time, and people look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, why are you talking like that? Because no one says that in America, watching football at the weekend. But ties into my question. What does an ideal Friday night or Sunday morning look for Scott Simmons?
Oh God, right. Okay. Right. So Friday night is family film night. So we sit with our kids and we watch a movie. So each week one of us has a pick of a film. That's sacred on a Friday. So that's just, it's such a great time with the kids. Um Sunday Sunday morning, I love getting up. I sort of love getting up early, sitting outside, with a cup of coffee and some water, and watching the sun come up, and just kind of trying, not thinking, just sitting there and taking in the moment, because we don't get much opportunity for that these days. So I love waking up a little bit early before the madness that is our kids starts up. Sunday we'll sort of go walking. I will usually try to fit in a film along the way. I got to tell you, I love listening to Sam Cooke on a Sunday morning. For me, listening to sort of Sam Cooke or Marvin Gaye, I love the Bee Gees, the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, Elbow. If I can fit in sort of listening to them on a Sunday, but I love first thing on a Sunday listening to Sam Cooke. I that's fantastic. That's a great start to a Sunday.
Absolutely. It sounds like a great start to the Sunday for me as well. And I have to now add to my bucket list Gibraltar because I now have a lengthy bucket list of things that people tell me on the podcast I should go here or I should go there. So the
Oh,
list
really?
is becoming large. I have a lot of traveling I have to do now, which I'm going to do, obviously. But
Good.
final question here, Scott. I do this at the end of every episode, but what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
Yeah, what's my words of wisdom? That's such a good question. Despite listening to your podcast, it's such a profound question, isn't it? And my words of wisdom, I suppose, it would be, you know, nothing is in life is final. You can make mistakes, and you can always adjust where you're going, and whatever decisions you make, you can do something about them. I think you have to focus on what your values are. I think you can't be driven don't be driven by what others tell you should be doing. Don't be driven by this idea that there's only one. I mean, you talk about it, the different routes into law. There's so many out there, and there's so much information out there. You can find your place in the legal profession. That there, reach out to people who are in it. Listen to this podcast. It's absolutely so valuable. Um, the people that you've had on here have just filled it with so much value. um you've got there's always an opportunity to make change, but finding the place that fits your values will always make you happier than being driven by what someone else tells you you should or should not be doing in your career.
Poetically said, beautifully said, Scott. But that's all we have. That's the podcast. So, Scott, thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. Lawyers in the Making, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.